It almost looks like in the order that I see us that we're in the same room, but that the camera is angled. Maybe I need to adjust mine a little bit more. Just there would be better. Yeah.
How's that? Oh no, this is already being recorded. Oh, dang it.
So Jess, are you nocturnal? Is that how this project works?
Increasingly so, I would say. But actually this week, because we haven't gone to daylight savings, there's only a 4-hour difference between the East Coast and here. So
Small victories.
So we'll maybe just give it a couple more minutes because Matt Zed is leading hopefully the first section, and I'm maybe potentially someone else from protocol will be joining on the call. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Matt Price will be able to join, but I guess he was saying that this week is spring break for Maceo, who's one of his kids, so there might also be many other better things to do than sit in front of a computer. Yeah, and I dropped the agenda, which actually, thankfully, we had kind of mostly discussed at the last round table, but there's budgeted a little bit of time just to check in and make sure that, especially the discussion section, there aren't any things that we need to surface.
Has anybody DM'd the missing parties? I will commence the DMing.
Yeah, I spoke to Matt Price, and I think it's like we just go ahead, because if he's able to join, he'll join. But it looks like maybe Grim, not Grim, that was like low. I made this much more dire. It looks like because he didn't respond back, that he might not be able to change that thing. Oh, okay, there. Matt Zumwalt is, which call link are we on? No, we're on that one. I screwed up. I made a big mistake. Not at all. I made a little big mistake on the call links, and I thought I caught it before everyone joined, but maybe I didn't edit something correctly.
Hey, did the link change from the link that I used, the link that was in the calendar, and Michelle did too, and it was saying host is not here?
Oh no, that's the link. I had made a mistake and pasted the old link in as the reminder. But this is the calendar link. I didn't change that.
Okay, all right. So you guys just showed up. Is that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It was like
I did something wrong.
While I was flipping out. Okay, that makes sense. And Michelle Lee is logging in too.
Okay, so I was saying that Matt Price sort of might not be able to join, but he'll let us know and join as able. So we could probably get started, and I dropped a bunch of read off the agenda for today. And it's going to be a little more three things cobbled into one meeting, in that there were going to be 2 roundtables and then sort of like stuff in between. But I'm wondering if someone is able to lead taking notes. Jess, that'd be awesome. But also if someone who hasn't taken notes before is able to, that would be great. I say that knowing that I don't take a lot of notes, so it should probably be me. And I'll, what we had at the beginning was the hope to do intros and or maybe a recap. And so maybe we could do the style of intros where I'm not sure if everyone knows each other on the call. So if someone would like us to just do a quick round of intros, could they raise their hand? Otherwise, I think we might all know each other, but I'm not sure. Do we need intros? Yeah, okay, let's do intros. So could everyone just maybe, in the interest of helping not take too long, I'm stumbling over words right now, just our name and location and maybe what project we're coming from. And I'll sort of say people in order that I see them. So I'm Dawn, I'm in Toronto with Edgy, and then Liz and Jess.
Hey, I'm Liz Barry. I work at Public Lab, and normally I'm in Brooklyn, but I'm calling in from North Carolina.
Hi, I'm Jess. I'm a PhD student at the University of Southampton, so I'm calling from the UK. And I've been doing some work with Edgy and getting involved with Data Together.
And then I see Brendan and Britt, and then Matt Zed.
What's up? I'm B5, aka Brendan, aka there's no other ones. I'm in Brooklyn, and I work from Query and Edgy, and whatever.
Hi, I'm Britt. I'm a PhD student at the University of California, Los Angeles. So I'm calling in from Los Angeles. I'm with Edgy and studying Data Together.
Matt Zed, then Michelle, then Ray.
Matt Zed, I'm in Philadelphia with Protocol Labs.
Hi, Michelle Lee, also in Philadelphia with Protocol Labs. I think I've met about half of you in person.
Hi, I'm Ray. I'm in Brooklyn, but sometimes Baltimore. And I work with Edgy in the web monitoring software team. Sometimes I forget what city I'm in, but and before that I was working with Data Together, or the previous incarnations of Data Together.
Awesome. So I just thought we could spend a couple of minutes before moving into stuff, revisiting kind of what where we're at, and then just making sure that the agenda kind of works for tonight. So I have links in this recap section for the January and February kind of more longer coordinating calls, and we had more this term just because it seemed like there was a lot of things that we needed to work through together. I just put the to-dos that we had identified out of the last coordinating call there. I wasn't going to go over them in depth, but I think some of these things are actually addressed by the agenda, except for my despair over Google Docs permissions. So the sort of plan for tonight was to have sorry, I should say this. At the February coordinating call, we decided to launch a new weekly roundtable format. And that happened. So part of today also might just be a quick check-in on whether we want to keep going with that. But at the last roundtable, Matt Zed led us, and we kind of talked through using an RFC for a decision-making process, but also identified that at this call, when we had more time together, that there was 2 topics we kind of wanted to treat as a roundtable conversation. So the first one is the who and how of like finalizing or kind of getting our mission and vision over the line. And I was actually going to ask Matt Zed if you're able to lead that because I felt like you had great energy and corralling us at the last roundtable, and you kind of set that direction. So I feel like it builds nicely. The other roundtable topic that we identified was like actually just doing demos of a working RFC process. I think, as you said, looking at the IPFS one that's currently up and running, and then also doing a demo of EDGI's consensus-based writing process. I can address that later. So I'm happy to take the lead on like that portion of that demo. I actually anticipate we might not need the full 30 minutes for that, but we've sort of budgeted it. And then what we always do at these things, always, as if we've had so many, is have partner updates. And then like last time we sort of just tried having some brief discussion topic things at the end. So I kind of interspersed, don't know if that was a good idea, but figured we should do those. And at least one of the discussion topics I think is the product requirements that was brought up in the last meeting. The other one I wanted to do a really brief check-in on is like reading group stuff. So that's between Matt P and me sort of trying to push that forward a little bit. And then the licensing SWOT-ish analysis thing that happened. But are there any other discussion topics that we need to surface as urgent? Okay, cool. And of course, if things come up, things come up. But it feels like roughly we have a way to proceed. Even if you're able, do you mind just introducing yourself and where you're from? Thanks for joining us. Cool background. Oh, maybe not. I was just gonna say, even if you're able to introduce yourself and where you're based. Maybe sound is still not. Okay, well, we'll just start going. So if that works, then why don't I just hand off to Matt Zed for the sort of first round table. And there are notes that I should have linked, sorry, from that call.
I have them open here. I'll paste them in the chat here. So that should be the notes from last week's call. The most important thing to bring your eyes to refresh from the discussion last week is the section in those notes that's the heading is collective brainstorm. What things should we decide this way? This is where we're trying to, what we succeeded in doing in last week's roundtable, which was 30 minutes, was to identify kind of the types of decisions that are there. And then further down, we then tried to identify some groupings. So I'll just read those verbally to get us started. Projects that we want to undertake as Data Together, what is and is not in scope of the Data Together project, organizations joining or leaving or being asked to leave, changes to agreements on partnerships and guidelines, code of conduct, technical roadmap, setting directions, licensing, anything with legal implications. This also rolls up to partnering orgs. Oh, right, so legal implications has external ramifications more so than some of the other decisions. Speaking publicly and press releases, so speaking publicly as Data Together, and I don't understand the next one. What kinds of data, what kinds of data are we going to hold, if any, in collections that are held by Data Together? Or what kinds of data are we going to focus on getting held? And then overall the mission and vision. And then we had sort of identified some groupings, those that require all party consent, or decisions that require all party consent, decisions about intergroup, the guidelines of intragroup, so guidelines of stuff within the group, as opposed to what here says boundary work, but basically how we as a group engage externally. And then sense of authority, I don't remember what that was referring to, and care around listening, uplifting voices, lifting up voices, and sort of discussion around, is that a responsibility? So this was basically this flagging that we, because there's kind of a social justice intention to this project, we have to be especially careful about that topic and elevate it as being forward in our decisions. So those are the things that we flagged as a group. And coming out of that, we sort of, in asking what could we do as a next step, we decided that really the next thing to do is to identify who is the small group of people who can identify what our decision-making process should be? What is the process, the structures we should put in place for making these kinds of decisions? And how will that group make that decision? Will it be that 3 people go and come up with a proposal and then they bring it back to this group and it gets signed off on? So that's what this next, now including the review, is 20 minutes. So next 18 minutes, we're trying to identify, answer that double question. The who should identify what the structure is and how should we get to that? Liz?
I had a slightly different understanding of the takeaway,
Oh yeah.
which was we need a decision-making process that's just big and just extensive enough to be able to know that we've decided on a vision.
Mm.
And writing the vision, we were going to reference some to see if it was relevant. I think some of EDGI's collaborative writing proposals and processes could be useful there. But to this point on decision making, we have to know when we've decided on the vision. And I think once the point of us convening is clear, I think then it's going to be easier to understand the appropriateness of other decision making formats for all the modes that you pointed out.
Yeah, you're right. I had misremembered. So the task for this discussion is to just identify who is going to draft a statement of the vision and the mission, and how are we going to decide to agree that that's our vision and mission. So that's the topic at hand right now. Done? Yeah,
that was my understanding, was sort of similar to Liz's. I just wanted to say, as a backstory or a thing that I want to make sure we grapple with, we've done so much drafting, and I feel like it would be nice if we could just say here together what we think our deliverables are, because part of what I think the drift was last time is that it felt like we diverged over what we thought the outcome of that process would be. Mm-hmm. Because I think we've done a lot of work towards what we think are a mission, a vision, and values. And it's all in that. I think most of it at this point, or the current-ish draft of it, is in the repo. So just to make sure that what are we all cool if we come up with a mission and a vision, and just say briefly what that format would look like for us that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Part of in the past discussions, I had been hesitant to define something using the language of mission because the project felt new, and it's a small group who's involved right now. And so I want to leave room for further stakeholders to get involved and feel a sense of ownership in steering what the overall mission is. But then at the same time, if there's not clarity about what this whole thing is and why we're doing it, there's nothing to get involved in, right? There's nothing to compel people to be like, hey, I want to be part of it. So I had this hesitation around that specific term, mission, because it feels sort of concrete. There's that whole reworking the mission statement is this loaded, complicated thing. And so one way to, if we're in a place where we know that we want that to be able to evolve over time, one way to ensure that you have space for it to evolve is to avoid the term mission and to just don't define it as the mission. But also that's kind of weird. Done.
I think that might be one way, and I know that. However, you say, people expect to see it framed as a mission, so it can be hard without providing a real compelling counter narrative to just not use that and have people sort of kind of engage with it in a similar way. I'm wondering if we could, through articulating a value about it changing, or speaking in some way about why its intent to be provisional, its intent to be revisited, we would address those concerns, because I also don't want to make a vision statement and a mission statement that then never change, that we are chained to for the rest of our life.
Yeah. So then it sounds like we're looking at writing something that we would present to the world as this is the mission statement, but in that statement there would be something that's like, this is provisional. This is all right. And so since we're keeping this whole conversation time boxed, and we have discussed the mission and the vision many, many, many times, we don't necessarily need to rehash that. It's more, how are we going to make a decision? And Don was asking, first step, what is the deliverable for whoever we delegate to? So the deliverable would be a mission statement and a vision statement. So a document that says mission and vision that also somehow flags that as being provisional. So are there misgivings about that? Or does that sound accurate? I see some people nodding. All right, so if then that's the deliverable, then who's going to produce that deliverable? Is it that people just raise their hands from the group of people who are on this call right now, put their heads together and come up with a document? How should we approach this? Brendan?
This is actually a situation where I think the RFC process might actually apply, given that we have a ton of documentation. We can chuck that up on the repo and say, hey, let's get this into a pull request and say, nothing's changed on this, and leave a period of time open and say, hey, and as soon as we get, maybe we can even use the GitHub style where like each organization picks up a person that when they approve that PR, it's like, cool, then we're approved. Just as a method of, I suggest that as a method of making it not tied to specific meetings, allowing other people to sort of dive in on it and sort of see it. But then that second bit might need some massaging in terms of who actually has to do the thumbs up. But I like the notion of having the current forming member groups sort of like have to help practice the process of what it means to grow from 0 to the current member groups in terms of approval, and then how that might use that as a template for how that might move forward.
So to tease apart in my head, you're partially proposing process of how it would get submitted, which we're discussing in the next roundtable.
Touche. I'm very bad at obeying instructions.
And then the question is, regardless of the process we use, who's going to be responsible for creating that draft, and then who has to sign off on it in order for us to know, okay, we have all agreed.
Mm-hmm.
So efficient number of representatives of the parties who are involved in this collaboration have agreed. So we have agreement. Like, who needs to do that? Who needs to be involved in the like producing that document, and then who needs to be involved in the like agreeing, the giving the thumbs up or thumbs down? Dawn?
I think what Brendan said, that someone across each organization, at least one, I think I would agree with, but I would also not want to limit. So that would be my minimum requirement, with a maximal also anyone who is interested, and that they would want to agree on whatever they put forward
Mm-hmm.
to the broader group.
So is that having one person from each org qualifies as quorum, but it's not limited to only one voice from each org? You could have multiple people. That makes sense. Brendan?
Yeah, and I would just add that like if we could even go so far as to pick individuals but with the expectation that those people are going to sort of make sure that any community they represent is drawn into the conversation, and sort of put that responsibility to say, hey, I'm not allowed to sort of thumbs up this thing until I've had a chance, I've gotten you into this, or like, I think your opinion is important here. Just as a method of proxying that in, so that we don't have to like wait for 7,000 yeses. But
And in this collaboration, what qualifies as each org? Is it Protocol Labs, Query, and Edgy, or is Public Lab one of those orgs? Or is Public Lab represented by proxy through Edgy? I guess that's Liz. Are you?
Yeah, Liz, you want to?
Do you want it to be the case that a decision is not valid until someone explicitly representing Public Lab has signed off on it? Versus.
Well, I think it's fair that I think there's enough discussion going on in Public Lab as well about how communities hold and share data that it's fair that Public Lab is one of these organizations.
Brendan?
Yeah, I'd second that. Just given the relationship between Public Lab and Edgy, and that Liz, you've been at a lot of these calls in person. I think it's a great idea to have you represented, Public Lab represented.
Right.
I totally agree. Even though Public Lab is the fiscal sponsor of Edgy, I think the actual work they do is separate and different enough from the work of Edgy that they have their own individual concerns on how they would contribute to to Data Together.
Mm-hmm. All right. Can we earmark that this definition of quorum minimum requirements, it won't scale. So if more organizations join on, you hit a point where it's kind of painful to need to get sign off from one person from every org, but it works for now. So we can do it for now. All right, well then we've defined what the deliverable is. We've defined what our quorum is for deciding.
Can I ask you about that, Matt?
Yeah.
About pain in this context. And because most of I can't think of a network or coalition that I'm not part of as an organizational member that wouldn't sign off on, say, like the new campaign or the new something. Like as an individual in a giant network, sure, no, I just like receive mailings. But as an organizational partner, I think this is a common process, but maybe you have a different experience or others.
I think it's more, well, just to qualify what I was saying, you start compartmentalizing types of decisions. You start identifying that there are some types of decisions that influence, that everyone has to be part of, and other decisions that it can be, right? So others can be compartmentalized, and you can reduce the definition of quorum. But for now, we can just do one person from each org. That'll work for a while, at least. All right, well then, is there more to discuss on that? Have we answered the question of Dawn?
Yeah, I guess my question is, what do we do with all the other stuff we wrote? Like, can we understand what this would be, what space this is filling? Because I want to, like, I think the values, like understanding how our values of working together are so important, but I get that they don't necessarily have to happen at the same time as the mission vision. And then I know you've done so much work at Zed, like writing through a bit of like a context around some of this stuff. And I think that has an important piece, but I also feel like that's too much to like tackle on. And I think we just did a lot of like tacking everything on and then like, let's all write together and then let's use GitHub for version control, which made it a bit complex. So yeah, I just wanted to gauge people's sense on that. Like, are we gonna like array, like kind of sweep away everything else? Are we imagining certain things as standing off to the side and eventually also need to sort of use a new process to sort of revisit them and kind of like refresh them or make sure they remain in sync?
Brendan?
I'd suggest that as like a wonderful point for a roundtable discussion, because I think we want to be careful about what we commit to in terms of what we do with this stuff. But like, I think that A, that stuff should all stick around, and B, there's a potential for this. This sort of starts to, we're talking a lot about reading. How much are we talking about writing? You know, there's a question there. And so I think I'd love to like just chat with, like, have that as a great half-hour discussion of what would we do with all this stuff we've produced, and can we structure it? Should we make it into a blog, or should we not? Is that a commitment we're not into? So I just suggest we table it till later.
Yeah, it actually even says, yeah, I agree with this. Should be a half-hour discussion for later. Okay. Dawn, your question makes me realize the one thing we haven't decided is who's going to make that proposal, because those people could then propose, and here's what we do with all the other stuff. And they might convene a roundtable to discuss that. So who's going to do the actual work of distilling down to a mission and a vision? We're just going to volunteer as individuals who wants to be involved.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
because I read many thousands of your words, Matt, about 6 months ago. And in the Data Together repo / Data Together, that is distilled. And I did very little creative writing other than what, say, Edgy's archiving work had produced, or that Protocol Labs had produced, or you had written brilliantly. I am wondering, I mean, I don't care if we don't start with what I synthesized, but it really was a lot of hours on behalf of this group, essentially. And when we stepped away from wanting to have mission in a way that felt, set in stone, we kind of never really reviewed all that synthesis.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I just wanted to highlight is there's quite a lot of work available, none of which that has to stay, but could potentially be a starting point. Mm-hmm. What do you guys think?
I agree. Dawn?
Yeah, I agree. And my only thought is, because it was written a while ago, I could see it probably needs to have a fresh set of eyes and conversation around. But if what was put forward was so radically different from that, I would be concerned, because it would be such a discrepancy. I feel like having been a part of that process, as of course many of us were on this call, I think that I think it would actually be good to start from there to do a revision and have that actually be a way to get us to a more concise, happy sort of mission and vision right now. Yeah, so I think we build on that, and I hope that where we wind up is not too far away.
Yeah, agreed. And I know that when I sort of was veering away from the word mission, still was thinking along the lines of what you had synthesized, how to take that same information, just present it with slightly different headings. And so it's more just landing that conversation that was in motion with your work is really what we need to do. So who is willing to be part of that group, who then is going to do that final synthesis? I am. Ray, Brendan, Jess.
I just have a question. That's the wrong time to put my hand up. I was just curious if people felt that they would rather, maybe this is a contentious question, but to have people involved in this sort of second synthesis phase who were there in the beginning, or if you're looking, as Dawn said, for sort of fresh eyes, because I would put myself forward to be involved in that, but I'm aware that I haven't really come to grips with all the material that's been, put together in earlier months.
Maybe you could be involved in the sense of, we do that first, finishing this synthesis that Liz started, which involves a lot of context, as Liz flagged. There's all of that information getting funneled into a more concise statement, but then you could read that and reflect back with fresh eyes from that. All right, so Ray and Brendan and Jess and me, Liz or Dawn, were either of you interested in being, or are you unavailable?
I'm just so busy. And my concern is more that I would be happy to be involved. I think we should also just make clear what a timeline is. And I'm just nervous that I would commit to a thing that then I would become a drag on not being able to attend, because my qualifying exams are in June. So from now till June is pretty gnarly.
All right.
And I'm available, but I feel like a new set of people should look at it and also, just be fresh about it. But I am a great editor. So happy to come in maybe after you guys do a pass. After you do several passes, maybe.
Right.
That was exactly what I was sort of hoping would inspire. It's just that we sort of effectively flip some of the relationships where some of us have been taking a more editorial or comments sort of position. Maybe we switch a little more into the proposal position and then let the others sort of get a chance to just take the comment space. Because like maybe we can find some time where Don can read it and be like, cool, but not asking to like, because yeah, you guys have participated heavily in the draft, at least the initial many rounds drafting.
Great. Oh, this.
I do have a question about whether, well, I'm probably jumping the gun, but for this writing, I'm interested in, while last year's process of writing happened on GitHub, I'm interested in moving into Google Docs for this because I believe Edgy's collaborative writing process, you know, those comments that just hang on the sides of the text where people can +1 and where you can see strike throughs, you know, it's better than GitHub.
Agreed. It's better for writing, collaborative writing. All right. So it looks like we figured out what our next steps are. I haven't been reading the notes, so maybe I'll just restate. We're out of time, but so Ray and Brendan and I will work on producing a draft that then Jess can review, and we can do maybe a round or two of iteration there. And then Liz and Don can, but especially Liz, because Don is busy, can do sort of editorial eye on those drafts in order to get it to a point where it's a proposal. And we will do that work in Google Docs, not in GitHub. And we did not set a timeline. That's the one remaining thing. Do we have a sense of what's a feasible timeline, Brendan, Ray, or Don?
I'm not to set a timeline for y'all, but just as like a frame to understand kind of like how we've been setting timelines, we said we would aim to be meeting once per quarter, but just putting through a bunch of extra meetings this time. So we're kind of moving into the next quarter. So I anticipate there being like 6 weeks between this. We're not going to do another meeting in like a 4-week or tighter cycle. It'll be like in the 6 to 8 range. So that is like on the horizon. Also potentially co-locating with an Edgy in-person meetup might happen over the summer. I don't think the month has been selected, but it would probably be July or August. And we had our last annual meeting. I don't know why I'm just like so into like this like ontology taxonomy of meetings, but I've like really got them. So there might be another one in August, thinking about that. So yeah.
So so it sounds like one option would be we officially ratify that mission at that meeting in July, August. Is that too long to go without it being officially settled?
My only sense, sorry, I feel like I'm like taking up a lot of space. My only sense is that if the goal is to bring other people in before then it's too long. Because I think we want to have something before then. So maybe we could like adopt it at a quarterly planning thing, which would take us into like May or June. And then maybe with new partners aim to have that be even just kind of confirmed, but if we've noticed already that it needs to be adjusted, done for that in-person meeting.
So could we also shoot for that 6 weeks from now? So if we're doing a larger group call in about 6 weeks, that by then we have something that's a solid draft that's been reviewed. It's not the first draft that's just been handed off by the 3 of us. It's actually been looked at by Jess and looked at by Liz, and it's ready to discuss as like a release candidate and put it into beta. Even added you to the second one. Oh, okay. All right. Thanks, Ian. All right. Well, then it sounds like we know what we're doing after this. We ran a little bit over. That was 25 minutes, not 20.
Damn, let's all go home.
Okay, wait. Oh, so that sounds exciting. The next thing that I had weirdly interspersed was partner updates. Do you want to do those now? Or we can have the second roundtable. I just thought there might be something we wanted to surface before kind of the bulk of the meeting had happened, but that we should like really lead with that conversation because that was like a natural sort of like second half to the one we started last week. I'm just gonna say let's go into the partner updates unless someone in the next 5 seconds raises their hands. And I nominated Edgy to go first. I just flipped the order this time, very exciting. And I was wondering if someone from Edgy would like to provide an update about what's happened over the last month. And keeping in mind that we've been pretty close contact recently, so these could maybe be more brief than they usually are, or there might be a lot going on, I don't know. Go Ray.
Sure. This is just a general organization-wide update, right? Starting from like the last, like.
We met February 12th.
Okay. So in that time, I think the big news from Edgy is we released the annual report, which is great, documenting the first year of Edgy's existence. And I can send the link to anyone who might not have that. I'll put it in Slack or something. Other than that, the web monitoring work continues. There's been more of a shift to training, like distributing some of the institutional knowledge. So some of the actual like reporting has slowed down, but we've done a lot of training to get some of the more senior analysts writing reports and things like that, which is great. We're continuing to write grants, and nothing's been improved, but stuff looks very promising. What else is going on? I'm not as familiar with the interviewing, but they have been onboarding more interviewers to interview scientists, federal scientists and things like that, which is great. And I think that covers a lot of the major stuff. And there's also been some steering committee offboarding and onboarding. So we have some roles shifting up. So we have actually now like a front-end developer who's on the steering committee now. Some senior people stepped down. We also have a grad student in communications who's been working in communications step up, and she's been working on the organization for a year or two. So it's great also to see among the steering committee, like some rotation there and people of different seniority mix it up too, which is I think good for the institution, or any institution really, but it's good to see. I might be missing some stuff, but that's the gist of what's been going on.
Yeah, I'll just add from an archiving side and sort of projects that are adjacent to Data Together, we're kind of still in a holding pattern, I think, on everything that we updated on last time. We just haven't heard back. So the grant stuff is still up in the air. We anticipated hearing sooner than later. We're still waiting, in particular on some of the like Compute Canada infrastructure support. That one I feel like really we should have heard back on from now. So we'll kind of have to pick that thread up. And there's some people from Edgy who were hired through the Technoscience Research Unit here in Toronto, who will be lending a little bit of their time to things that might also involve having like a project that touches on Data Together stuff, which is really exciting. So there's two people who have kind of environmental justice background and one with a data justice background. And then in addition, maybe one more person to help with some of the like, if the Compute Canada thing goes ahead, helping with setting up and maintaining that. And so that person most directly would probably do things that are actually working with Data Together code base. And then the other thing I wanted to say was, but I think many of you were on this call, there was a joint archiving/Data Together and environmental data justice call, which was really fun after the roundtable last week, to try and think about, keeping the Edgy's archiving work kind of close to some of the like motivations that started why we got involved in data rescue. And so I think that'll be a really wonderful to keep close to Data Together work as it unfolds. And the goal or motivation was that over the next sort of like quarter to try and sit in on each other's calls at least once. But I think Brendan already did that. So if we were being mechanistic here, we could just like check that box. But we will do it again. So it's an open call, and I'm happy to share the link more broadly. And if people in Protocol Labs are interested in joining, I think that would be okay. If I think that could be awesome, to be honest. And it's Thursdays at 11 Eastern time. And then maybe trying to get one of the roundtable calls also be a moment for some environmental data justice people to join. In true edgy fashion, every other edgy person on the call, which is most of you, did we miss anything? So it's gonna hand off to Query now.
Sounds good. Yeah, we're humming along. In an effort to sort of draw things back together, we centered in on web monitoring as a project that we're going to focus on like crazy to try and provide some data for and test out some of our initial stuff for. Today we released 0.2 of Query, which comes with a front end finally, and it's a work in progress, but it's progressing, which is fun. Yeah, and so things are coming along. It's really exciting right now to actually see government data hit the work that we're doing and like actually watch it become available. In the coming weeks, we're going to launch the bridge to the old internet, where you can see /EPA mirror /dataset, and anybody can see that. And then if they want to download that data, they can download Query, which includes IPFS inside it, and you'll be running and participating in distributing that information, which is a goal we've been charging at all quarter, and it looks like we're actually going to hit it, with knock on wood. And so team's been busting their butts. Not all of them are facing their own computers right now. And I've just turned into this giant irritation where I sit on these calls and pollute the room with noise. So I'm very excited. Things are coming along. Yeah, and to that end, I think a small ask I would put out is we are actively looking for, we have this query recipes organization we put together, which really looks a lot like the custom crawls work that we were doing before. Which are these sort of like configurable things that lets you sort of create a specific data set from a specific problem set. And so if I'm going to be slowly but surely sort of like reaching out to some of you who we're working with on the custom crawl stuff, a lot of we've intentionally made sure it works in Python, and we're very excited about sort of like sharing some of that. And so I'd love to just get a little bit of feedback from the community who has more experience with custom crawls than I do. Oh yeah, that's it. I'm done. No, Liz, do you have a question? Oh yeah, and our update. Sorry, go ahead. And Liz and I had a wonderful planning session where we actually sat down and started to work through a whole bunch of like quite data together specific stuff. And by Liz and I mean Liz, myself, Rico, and Tom, who are also present, working through access control in relation to data, and how that sort of graphed or didn't graph to communities, which has been a big problem that I've sort of been soliciting Liz's help on. And we've got some stuff coming out there. Liz, I don't know if you want to speak more to it. I'd hand it off to you. Yeah, it's going to be a blog post. It's going to be awesome. So many circles with colors. They're really good. And then Jess, did you have a question?
I was just going to say I'm going to be at Query next week for 2 days.
It's going to be super fun. I'll show you your future desk. It's right there. Check it out.
Waiting for you.
What? Happy hour Thursday, Friday, or the weekend?
Yeah. Well, it's Rhizome's data week next week, and so Jess is going to be in Monday, Tuesday specifically, and then potentially a little more later.
Yeah, so it's Rhizome's ethics and web archiving event from Thursday, Friday, Saturday of next week. And then I'm going to be around basically from Monday. So I'm going to come for the Data Together call at Query on Monday. Hopefully Brendan knows that. And then I'll be there on Tuesday and Wednesday hanging out and bothering people. But then I'll be at the conference later on in the week. But we'll be around. So we should all, whoever's around, get together.
Off topic, Brendan, are you going to the conference?
I don't know.
Okay.
I have a lot of things to do. I'd like to. I would love to. Yeah. Also, yes, on the DT side, I can speak to it. We've had some GitHub contributions. This guy who wants to like archive really cool, like GIF-based choose your own adventure stories has shown up, and he's just been jamming out work package contributions. So it's really exciting. And then someone else is just really irritated that our PDF package doesn't work.
Protocol Labs. And then just as doing a time check, we have 40 minutes left. So we might have a shorter discussion period and demo period than we initially budgeted, but that's totally fine.
All right. So the IPFS project is launching into its Q2 planning right now. So that's what my energy is tuned into at the moment, is guiding the many different working groups to setting their plans for the next 3 to 6 months. And then as far as is directly relevant to Data Together, we're spinning up a project which some people have already been flagged on, where one of our colleagues, who's also named Michelle, but is not Michelle Lee, who's on the call, is going to be doing a product requirements analysis for the Data Together software. So this would be specifically interviewing edgy stakeholders and giving a clear statement of what does this software need to be to satisfy edgy's requirements? What are edgy's requirements, and what does the software need to do in order to satisfy those requirements, in order to distinguish that from the many other use cases that have been considered and other possibilities that are being pursued, and get a very, very clear frame on here's what edgy needs out of this software, which we think will also give a good signal for viewing edgy as an example of an organization that has requirements like those. We think that there are other organizations and groups and communities who have very similar needs. So if we give a clear statement of here's what edgy needs, it will also allow others to look and say, oh, yeah, we need that. And understand what this software is aimed at doing and understand that it's relevant for them. So that's the main thing. Anything else, Michelle, that we should be updating about?
Those are the main updates. I see that we have what might be a placeholder for that conversation down under discussion topics. Is that what was intended on? Okay, great. So we can talk more about it then.
Yeah, I have questions about what is being built, the goals of that, because I know Brendan is building a lot.
Great. So we'll come back to that in a few minutes. That's
we can. Sorry to cut you off right at the end. I mean, we can move into that now. I think if the demo stuff we could bump below it because we're on it. Why don't we just do that? So, did everyone see? And are we able to publicly share that link, Matt said?
So this document, it's in the Data Together private folder, which I think most or all of you have access to. So I don't want to make the document public because it's like a work plan for one of our colleagues. But it's certainly something that we want edgy stakeholders to look at and comment on. And also just to understand what the intention is for the work there. Michelle, do you want to give Michelle will be sort of guiding the actual work of creating this deliverable, so she can maybe speak more directly to.
Sure. Yeah, I dropped the link in the side chat and I'll share the screen. If you need access, just request it, and then maybe Matt, since you won't be screen sharing, can keep an eye out for those. Okay. This is a work plan or sort of, our name for a problem statement. And what I've heard through Matt and from some others on the call is that while a lot of really great tools have been written and built for Data Together's needs over time, those needs have also changed from that really in-person hackathon focused tools to more long-term stewardship, decentralized across time and decentralized across organizations. And so that's both on one hand, we have those changing needs and evolving needs that we want to make more explicit. And on the other, that tools like IPFS have addressed some of those needs, but might be missing things, missing pieces or connective tissue to make them really solve problems end to end. And so what we think, what we're proposing as a next step is to have Michelle Bruce take on this activity that would document the needs of data together in ways that can help guide the planning of new tools, new work, releases, and also focusing energies of open source contributors. So we sort of see three main objectives and results here. The first is to spend a bunch of time with Brendan, John, and everyone else on the EDGI team to translate those specific needs into something called the job story. And so that's very task specific. I think we've done a great job in the past of documenting the problem space, the overarching, the whys of what we're doing, but less so the what. And I think that's where it's been challenging for us to have our IPFS team pay attention to specifics, and also maybe some of the other people writing tools and code as well. So what we're proposing here is, when using this framework, a situation, a motivation, and an expected outcome. So for example, when a new data set is brought to my attention, or when Matt or someone maybe help me out here, of a trigger of an activity.
When a new participant joins the network.
Sure. They want to be able to know what data sets are available for them to access, or whatever those needs are, yeah. And create a complete, a reasonably complete set of job stories, so that we can make sure that the software and the tools can serve those purposes. So that's the first thing. The second is to look at the existing components available through IPFS and/or Data Together, and figure out what the diff is between what we have today and what we need to meet EDGI's requirements and fulfill these job stories. And then the last is what Matt has referred to before, which is providing guidance for other groups evaluating the software. So what exists in terms of architecture, features, documentation, so that other groups can take a look and spend 20 minutes or 30 minutes and understand whether or not this software will solve the problems. So those are the main outcomes of this proposed project. It's in a proposed state because we wanted to make sure we talked with this group first to confirm that this is what we wanted to do, and also make any adjustments to either the big picture or details in response to that. What are some initial thoughts?
Some people also might, I can only see a couple people, so I'm sorry if I'm missing, but I think it sounds great in terms of really helpful to try and do a bit of a understanding what was built and kind of where it's covered, or the gaps between how things got built and maybe where we see needs. I'm a little unfamiliar with job stories. It seemed interesting. I read the article. I feel like I have like this inherent love for participatory design processes. So I thought it was interesting about the sort of rationale around why you would not include personas, but I think I will understand. I want to go through the process to understand more about that choice of using a job story as a mechanic here.
Liz, does this answer your questions that you had raised?
Yeah, I guess I'm surprised. I didn't realize that there was going to be any more software specifically to meet EDGI's needs besides Query, which is already like, we've been so underway with Query. So yeah, I guess I'm a little surprised.
Maybe I should clarify. This is it's describing what is it that EDGI needs from Query. So Query is being built to address many different needs from many different stakeholders. Like, it's a product for potentially thousands of people to use with many different reasons for using it. This is about specifically carving out what does EDGI need from this software, and what is the way that this software will satisfy those needs, or actually this document is about what does Edgy need from Query, so that we can make sure that Query really successfully and clearly satisfies those needs. And it makes Brendan's life easier because it lets him know that he's covering Edgy's needs. It makes Edgy's life easier because it lets Edgy know what's there and what's not there and why it's there. And it makes it easier for external stakeholders to make sense of this makes this use case and this bundle of use cases like concrete of, okay, here's the example. Brendan?
Yeah, totally. More eyes is better, and to that end, in my opinion, and to that end, I think it's exciting to just reevaluate that, because to Matt, to your point, like we're trying to serve many use cases and understanding sort of a specific set. It might make sense to, if we had a better understanding of that landscape, it might make sense to say, hey, well, actually, this query plus some other tool or some external process might actually be a really great fit for something. I apologize.
But my thought is, in terms of who is involved from Edgy on that side, I know you said, I think I saw my name and Matt Price, but I'm wondering, actually, I don't know exactly, it sounded like interviewing was the main sort of proposed way of trying to get at some of this stuff.
Yep.
I think there could be, like, I feel like I have to say this as an Edgy person, there could be an opportunity to like either one, try and figure out how to involve more people, or like have there be some way that this helps Edgy back by like maybe having a presentation, or like have Michelle provide some synopsis in a way at a steering committee meeting or something, just to kind of try and like tighten a bit of a, like making it a learning process for Edgy people too, because I think part of this whole journey has been also Edgy people coming from so many different ideas about what this thing needs to be, and like not having a well-defined problem space, like figuring out how to work on a thing collaboratively. So having some perspective of like, you know, a snapshot of current needs, I think could be really interesting.
These are really helpful comments. I think I had the impression after talking with Matt that that Edgy folks were pretty clear on what their needs were, and had a fairly consistent idea, but it sounds like that may not be the case, in which case I think a different process would be valuable, different and more collaborative early phase.
Yeah, I have framed that, like, to clarify that, Edgy as a whole is a pretty large organization with many, many different people, many of whom know very little about this work. So when I say the Edgy people, I mean the people who are representing Edgy in the Data Together collaboration. So like Matt Price and Dawn and Liz and now Ray and now even like this group has a pretty clear sense of what they need from Query and why they're using Query. And so that when I said the Edgy people have a pretty clear sense, it was that subset. And then Edgy as a whole, as an organization, this is what Dawn is saying, it would be great if the result of this could then communicate to that larger organization what's going on.
And since that, like, I think Query is going to benefit a ton from this output, of this work output, I'd be happy to put some time into like helping prep something to report back, or maybe drawing key figures from within Edgy, given that I have two hats to wear, if that's helpful. If that's not helpful, then I'll step back. But
right.
And just quickly, Edgy is sort of in their sort of all Edgy meeting, we're working on a new format where we have these monthly check-ins where the different working groups can present to like 5 to 10 minutes. So this is a good opportunity when we're ready, I think, to share back, and we can do a larger presentation or something. So there's sort of a structured way to sort of report back and share what we've worked on here back to the larger group. And that's attended by everybody, Edgy-wide.
Liz, do you want to go ahead, and then I think we should move on to demos, unless there's like a burning response or clarification.
I'm getting pretty excited about this. If it's about, you know, understanding what it would take to, you know, from what Matt said earlier, like get more people to participate in like in a decentralized way backing up this known government public data. And if there's extension to like people collaborating over the decentralized web to back up maybe not government data, but other data that's like 100% public, like sensor data of air quality in the middle of town or something, it would be really incredible to have like these needs really well described towards figuring out how a lot of people can collaborate to store that. There's such a gigantic hole in the functional internet for this right now. Thank you so much. So am I getting this right? This is what we're doing?
And part of the effort is to gather that information of statements like what you just said, as this is what Edgy wants from the software. And there's the like short term, here's the stuff we absolutely need, and then there's the like down the road, here's what's possible. And answering Aben's question, it's going to be a public document, and we can sort of decide down the road where it'll actually get stored.
Did it together blog. Just joking. No, not a new blog, not yet. So I thought maybe we could move into demos now and just think about 10 minutes. Does that feel right? I feel like I could demo the collaborative writing thing in like a cool 5. But Matt said I don't want to like put a time crunch on you.
Yeah, I can work with constraints. Michelle,
Great.
did you?
Yeah, I just wanted to recap some of the comments. And so we want to clarify that this is about the development work on Query specifically. We'd like to make this a more collaborative process, both in the requirements gathering as well as sharing back to Edgy, more cycles of that. And then be deliberate about sharing in public forums, whether it's in various public GitHub repos or publishing on blogs, TBD. We can make sure, I can make sure that this is incorporated in the work plan proposal and send it back out to you, and we'll make those adjustments before we kick off this project. Sound good?
Yeah, and just maybe when there's a final draft, oh, sorry, Michelle. Can we drop that in the Edgy channel in a way that that Edgy steering committee could see? Because I think that's something where we would want to just give them an update. So if it doesn't have to be an editable doc or anything, but even a PDF, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'll make a slight variation that doesn't name our colleague, or just changes how it names our colleague and their involvement, but yes.
Awesome. Okay, so just to check in on our schedule, we have like 20 minutes left, and so we'll have a short demo of a RFC and then Edgy's writing process. And then the sort of other elements that had been surfaced as things to talk about was this licensing SWOT analysis, and then potentially reading group. I think those can be quite brief, but I also want to suggest people think about future roundtable topics. So Matt said that was me buffering. Can I hand off to you right away, or do you want me to start with the Edgy demo?
Could you go first? I've been so curious.
Sure, yeah.
About this. I want to hear about it.
Well, I buffer, but I'm not totally ready. So I'm going to share this screen. Just as a background, Edgy has a protocol which has been slowly accreting over time, like a piece of sand in underwater mollusk thing. But it's been growing and has a portion at least that covers why we work together, and then also goes into modes of working collaboratively together. And unfortunately, it's not able to be publicly available yet. That's a goal, but I think it's needed someone to circle back and just review and make sure we're comfortable with everything being fully public. But I actually think it could be a really wonderful resource. And so my goal is to get that out there. And now I'm trying to figure out how to share the screen because it's one of those days. Okay. And so I think you just see a Google Doc that says Edgy protocol, but it's kind of in a weird, I'm in a weird moment. Okay. And so there is a section that's open communication within EDGI, and then it's this writing, editing, and reviewing documents section. And so, I mean, this is really, in many cases, using a Google Doc, but I think there's the added intention of working in suggestion mode. And then we use, and I couldn't find off the bat a doc where that's like active in process, because I think that would be a better demo than this. But so by working in suggestion mode, we are like registering the changes, but then having people go back through and +1 has been one of the main ways. So where we ask people to sort of also agree or sort of register what parts they think should go ahead or not. We also say sometimes -1, but it doesn't typically affect things. You also, unless otherwise specified, the owner of the document is the person who sort of is managing that process of changes. Within the archiving and community tech working group, I think we've always said as long as 2 people +1 it can be merged in. And so I think that has been the way that we've managed sort of like a living, like writing together or like articulating values. We've used it for academic stuff. We've used it for setting up protocols. We're currently using it in the environmental data justice sort of working group side really heavily to come up with things like our our program description or like projects that we're working on. So if I go to EnviroData, if I go to the main EDGI website, weirdly, the description for the EDJ working group also came out of this. I feel like this is like a terrible demo. I just showed you a Google Doc. Now I'm waiting for a website to load. So I'll just say if people have questions, we could talk about it. And if you want me to try and dig up a doc, that would be a better, those are big stickers. If you want me to dig up a better example, I can try from one of the archiving or the archiving working group things. Yeah, go Matt, but that's when I cut off. So if anyone else has a question, please just jump in.
So my question was, so the part that you showed has more guidelines of how to participate in collaborative authoring and modifying of documents, and how to reach consensus in that process or use like a consensus and sensibility in that. Does it also spell out actual decision making? So things like deciding as a group, this is our mission statement, those kinds of like loaded formal decision points, and being able to represent a decision was made at X point, that this document represents consensus. Does it include that layer or no?
So the protocol does. Let me just stop sharing the screen for a second because I feel like that is not visually helpful. But there's a part that I think has only ever been implicit, which is that some of the like revisiting the sort of drafted concept note, which is how EDGI was operating for the first while, happened at the in-person meeting in Boston. So in addition to how those communication guidelines and decision-making guidelines are specified within the protocol, which sort of, in addition to collaborative writing and that as a process, also uses consensus -1 at steering committee meetings with a steering committee membership of 8 to 11. Right now, I think we're at like 9. The actual like refining EDGI's priorities for the 2017-18 year, like what we're currently in, really was launched in August with a lot of like kind of an in-person, I would say like post-it clustering activity. Like it felt pretty design thinking in terms of like I've seen people use similar ones elsewhere. And so we had some prompts to surface like the Maya process. We never got to the Maya process, Brendan. No. There was supposed to be a purported Maya process that Maya was unhappy with being given the name to, around sort of then bringing those values back into making sure that what the working groups are actually working on kind of aligned with it. So we had like a bit of this post-it clustering activity to surface like themes and then have that check in about what our original mission and vision had been written as. And there was an updated one that came out of that. And then instead of happening in person, there was sort of a request sent back to each working group to look at this document that had been collaboratively and in person worked on, and then kind of understand or see how it aligned with their current activities.
So is there a way to see what are all of the documents that have been formally ratified, and when was each document ratified and how?
There would be, there are only documents that are officially ratified at like the EDGI wide level, I think are like quite few, and those would be documented as decisions in steering committee minutes. But they're not tracked on the doc necessarily. I think there's a not consistently, there's a line on the EDGI protocol saying when it was originally adopted, but it hasn't been since then. Within the archiving like working group stuff, and so there's some discretion within each working group, and within that working group, like we didn't document things in that way for a good 6 months. So we have documents, we have meeting minutes and notes, but I wouldn't say that you would have like a really accessible record of like, here's where those decisions landed. And I think that's something that kind of emerged over time. All of the archiving, oh, Brendan, I think you have a point. I'll just say this, and I know I'm sort of taking up too much time, but all of the archiving stuff is also able to be public. So I'll find a good representative example of one that might still have some stuff open or a doc that was decided in that way, and drop it in the chat and then in the minutes afterward for reference. And then Brendan, if you have a last point, but then I'll sort of take a step back.
Yeah, just to say that a lot of the sort of effects of this fairly simple design make it such that it drives consensus sort of through participation pretty, I won't call this the perfect working format, but having worked in it, you sort of build consensus up through the +1ing process. And if anything needs a sort of hardline decision, that tends to be put to the steering committee. And everybody over time sort of develops a sense of what is or is not a steering committee decision. Not a perfect process, but the +1ing process and the sort of copious comments that accumulate in relation to specific pieces of text tend to sort of form the sort of layered body of knowledge.
Why don't I hand it off to Matt Zed now?
Sure. All right, so I'm going to demo the show my screen. All right, I'm going to demo the RFC process that we are imitating at IPFS because it's populated with actual content, so it's easier for you to see. So this is the Rust language, the people who maintain the programming language called Rust. And this is, I'm going to show you the GitHub repo where they actually do the proposing and merging of their RFCs, but they just render the content of that repo as this website. So it's the same content, but rendered as this landing place where you get this, oops, I didn't mean to hit that. You get this representation of all of the decisions that have been made by this organization over their history. So, and they're all numbered, and you can, and so these are all things that people proposed and then agreed on. And the fact that it's listed here means they agreed on it. They agreed that, hey, this is a good idea. And then someone followed through and actually did it. Now, the landing page includes all of this orientation info about how to propose something and how to participate in that process, how to create a proposal, what the process is for them being reviewed. And I'll give you like a quick glance at that. But then it gives you this very clear way to see and to reference to and also to link to decisions, right? So you can say, so here's an example I just chose at random. So this one was proposed twice, or maybe it was proposed once early on in the organization at RFC number 19, and then it was updated, and now you have 127. And then this has a link to like the follow-up actions, right? So we decided to do it, and then here's where the work was like flagged as something for someone to follow up on. And there's a template for how these RFCs are structured. So there's a summary section, you express your motivation, and then you get into the detail. There's sometimes a guide level explanation that gives you, it's like another, it like defines the terms and things, and then you get call out drawbacks, alternatives, and then unresolved questions, which is very interesting. So unresolved questions includes a section that's like, these questions need to be answered in order for us to merge this RFC. So you can have things that you're going to answer during the implementation. So that's a quick run through of the structure. And let me show you the repo. So I said there's this GitHub repository that has the same content. So you'll notice that this is the same text that was there rendered on that website, and all of this orientation info is just in the root of this GitHub repository. And then there's a folder in that repository that has each of the RFCs. Now it's loading slowly. But basically making a new proposal means just creating a new file in this folder that uses that template, and then you submit a pull request that submits that proposes adding that file to this folder. And so when you submit that pull request, you can see there's 65 RFCs open right now that are open for discussion. And this is where you can propose. And so let me pull up one that I am familiar with. This is my proposal to the IPFS community, proposing that we should use this approach. And so the first pull request is RFC 0 saying, hey, let's use this approach. And so it looks like, wait, this is the template. Oh, yeah, because that's the template RFC. I was looking in the wrong file. So in my pull request, yes, so here's my proposal. I summary, begin using an RFC process. Here are the motivations. I give my explanation, etc. So I submit that, and I'm submitted it in this pull request, which is number 1, where people can discuss. And this is where it slightly overlaps with where Edgy has been using GitHub to collaboratively edit documents. Edgy's been using Google Docs to collaboratively edit documents. We've just been editing the documents. So this is people catching typos and things like that, and also people giving bigger suggestions. And this gives the full history of how all that happened. I agree that this way of showing the process of collaboratively editing content does not work anywhere near as good for creative writing. It's designed for editing code, and it works for editing code. But the whole idea being that I can paste this file in here, I propose adding that file, that you can have a whole history of people commenting on it, and then you have officially, if you agree to ratify that decision, this file gets merged into that repo. It shows up on that website as a decision that was made. So that's the basic idea. It formalizes the process of how something is officially like sort of proposed for ratification. And then it gives a clear signal of what has or has not been ratified. And once it has been ratified, it gives you a clear signal of like everything that has been ratified. And so, any questions? I'll stop sharing. I can share again if people want me to show something again. It's just easier to see the faces. So I don't see these two processes as being incompatible. I'll throw that out there. But did anyone have questions? or observations? Dawn?
I agree. I don't think they're incompatible, but I think that we would want to prioritize some key features, and you surfaced some really great ones. It was cool to see them in contrast, particularly around things like recoverability of understanding when a decision happened,
Mm-hmm.
And like a log of that. But I think that they're both too big for like what we need right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would favor and being really mindful of Liz's points before about what we're taking on in terms of a barrier or like setting up sort of a barricade or limiting participation if we go too heavily to an RFC process. I mean, I think there are also limitations by going really into we work full-time in Google Doc mode too.
Brendan?
Yeah, I fully agree. To be specific, with the notion of working in Google Docs primarily at being a method of sort of developing work, but I do really love the notion of having that work product reflected and sort of solidified in GitHub, just because I think a lot of our community borders onto technical. So I'd even if it just meant sort of going through the process of taking some of these Google Docs when they feel finished and sort of archiving them somewhere. Maybe it's not part of the formal process, but I'd be willing to do that work. I'd be very happy to, because for personal reasons, I need just like a repository of the stuff that we've done. And so I would be happy to sort of contribute to that. But yeah, I agree. I don't think we need to like sort of bring in the full RFC process right now. Personally, I do think that it's something we could grow toward. But why sort of, we can cross that bridge when we get to it. Personally, I think the two, and I agree with you, Matt, that I think the two are really compatible. I love the idea of developing stuff in Google Docs that are very sort of, but then having some processes there. The other thing I would flag is just that one of the things that makes Edgy's Google Doc oriented, suggestion oriented process so functional is all of the parties sort of know each other, and there's sort of everybody in the Google Doc space is aware of each other to some degree or another. You get a lot of flyby, sort of like hello, goodbye, because Edgy's big and sprawling. But I think one thing I would sort of be cognizant of, if we just were to make this like totally public and anybody can drive by and comment on stuff in a Google Doc, that might get a little unwieldy. So maybe we have to think through a process for just have to ask for edit capacity to the document, and it's really easy. It's like very, very light barrier to entry, but I'd like to avoid somebody jumping on and posting a bunch of stuff that's just trash. By trash, I mean unconstructive, things that violate code of conduct, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'll just throw in, or did anyone else? I didn't see any hands up. Liz.
I can go after you.
Yeah, I was just going to throw in, like, when we started this conversation weeks ago, I had said, well, this is what we're doing with IPFS, which is at a very different point of maturity than this project. So I'll show you what we're doing because I'm doing it anyways. And so I'm not strongly advocating for that we should be adopting this approach. There's also sort of an in-between option of Loomio, which is a really cool app that we could demo on a different call that would let us have the, hey, we produced this document in Google Docs. Now we are formally proposing it. We are formally agreeing or disagreeing. And then you get this listing of all the stuff that's been proposed, accumulating over time. So we could potentially use that as this, gluing it together.
Yeah, that's a neat idea. Yeah, Loomio is designed for, like, I think it maxes out, somewhere between 250 and 500 participants, but it's designed for small group decision making. I was really impressed with seeing some of the RFC features, like that linked log of decisions, like chronologically, super awesome. I think whatever the actual pieces of how we talk to each other, like whichever tools we use for that, we should be aiming towards, this nice chronological log of decisions made. It seems like there's a way to extract that kind of information that's buried in meeting minutes. So I was really impressed with that. I guess generally I still hold with some of my earlier comments, and those really regard like an online writing heavy process that demands a lot from the speaker up front. It demands a lot of fluency, kind of like an already in the know-ness that may be ideal for, say, the more like code contribution space, but will not be, it is really, I think, going to be self-defeating for the network shaping, the network formation, what are we really about space? Yeah, so I mean, I think we'll probably, I'm just kind of guessing a little bit that we'll have, pieces of multiple processes, and perhaps ones we haven't heard from yet, because I mean, we all have our eyes on how open source communities are like listening at scale. There's a lot of innovation going on right now. So yeah, I look forward to really like a lot of ways of input, generally in Data Together. Thanks.
One thing I'd add, I know we're at time, is having a template that's encouraging, but that it almost simplifies the process of I want to propose something, and it gives you the guidance of how to concisely and effectively propose that. I agree. If it's presented wrong, it can be intimidating, but if it's framed right, it can actually be very helpful. It also makes it easy if they're consistent when you're reading through people's proposals. There's like a structure to them. So that's maybe part of what we could flag for follow-up.
Awesome. Yeah. So just because we are over time, I will just gesture at the kind of final things that we had mentioned. The key one being, but if it's okay, just aiming to be done within the next 5 minutes. I would like to just have like a really quick check-in on the roundtables. So we said we would kind of provisionally adopt it. We've had 3 in between this call and the previous coordinating call. Are people okay continuing with those as a way to actually have conversations about things that surface in the coordinating call or other bigger questions? Is that cool to keep going with? Awesome. And so we only have one proposed topic in the wings, which is thinking about website stuff. I think there was 2 that came up in this call today, but I would also just like to encourage or ask all of you to think about a topic that you might be interested in leading a roundtable around. And the sort of way we're asking people to indicate that interest is by opening an issue that uses the word roundtable somewhere in it, in the Data Together /Data Together GitHub repo. Then the other thing that actually came out of a roundtable was that Brendan did an initial pass through of kind of almost a SWOT, like a light SWOT, SWOT-ish analysis of sort of 4 almost like scenarios of licensing, because this conversation has been sort of ongoing for a while. Though it was exciting to see people jumping right into code regardless of the license over the last 2 weeks. And I know, Brendan, you just dumped it in that issue, and I'm wondering if, given our thoughts about collaboration and stuff today, if maybe that might be something that we want to think through a little bit more, or get some input on before we try and have a decision, if that works. Just because I feel like, there might be we might want to allow other people to also contribute or ask them to, so it's not all on you.
Yeah, in particular, I don't think I did a very good job on the 4th one, and which was, I'd love to sort of solicit some feedback on that as well. So yes, please chime in on that issue. We'll paste it in the notes.
Great. So, and then that might be something where, we'll need a decision structure before we can really, I think, decide if we are going to change a license, which is, some of the proposals don't involve changing a license, but some do. So that, looking at our timeline of being about 6 to 8 weeks out for the next coordinating call, means it's not an urgent decision. And then the last sort of thing I wanted to touch in on, and then ask if anyone else has stuff, and then close this out, is the reading group we kind of had that really a conversation that it feels like everyone gets really excited about, is like thinking how to understand some idioms or metaphors or concepts that we keep touching on around possession, or other things that sort of connect to like language to describe decentralized web or how we see governance operating. Matt P generously offered to I guess provide his pedagogical expertise to thinking about a way to construct that through maybe having a lower stakes reading group, but then also maybe seeing it as like a syllabus, maybe just one, not multiple, I'm getting ahead of myself, exercise. So like that, figuring out a way that we could do it together, but also have it serve as a resource for other people. I was gonna touch base with Matt about this next week. If other people are interested, please let us know, and then we'll figure out how to do that, because we're both in Toronto. We were probably just gonna sit together and do it, but I'll make sure to drop an update in Slack. But we gotta do something in Toronto if you all get to meet in person in New York. Okay, so those are my like hopefully not abandoning things on the agenda. Do people have parting thoughts? I know we identified some to-dos in text. I'll do like a bit of a cleanup from here and just pull them down to the bottom and post that after this meeting. But we have our key times for when we meet, which are Mondays. So maybe we'll just check in about a range of weeks that work better, but it won't be for a while before we're not going to set the next meeting today for next quarter. Parting thoughts, words of wisdom, goodbyes.
You're all wonderful. No parting thoughts.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.